Welcome to this edition of Safe and Sound. I'm your host, Kirk Webb. This is sponsored by White Mountain Fire and Life Safety. And on today's show, we have Teresa Kolodny, who is a rehab psychologist that works with mental health therapy. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, I am excited to have you here. I know we've had a little bit of interaction with some of the job descriptions that I do, and kind of helping with our guys and even out in the public in helping keeping us in the game, so to speak, because there's a lot of, with the type of job we do, it's not normal. The things that we see, the things we have to do, dealing with different people and things like that. So it can become a very stressful and mental health issue. And I know how long have you been doing this type of work?
Probably about 30 years now.
Okay. Yeah. And over your course of your career, you've probably seen a lot of things, haven't you?
Well, I think I've probably worked with the whole gamut of issues when it comes to mental health, good mental health and poor mental health and mental illness. I've worked with kids in schools. I've worked with the elderly. I've worked in hospitals. I've taught at the universities. So I've done a lot of different things.
You got a great base of experience to work with.
One would hope.
And I know when you first, because you've recently just moved up here out on the mountain.
We did.
And how do you like it?
I love it here. We've had a summer home for 12 years, and my parents have been here. Well, my mother now. My dad passed away, but my parents moved up here about 30 years ago. And my husband retired from the Air Force in Tucson, and we lived there for almost 30 years. But we've been coming up here in the summertime, and we love Show Low. We love it.
And sorry, I'm kind of partial to the area. I was born and raised, of course, I like the lakeside area, but that's where, but it is a great community, lots of good people to work with. And I know one of the things when you first was coming up here, you kind of specializing in a certain area that really, I think you enjoy, and I think and it's equine therapy.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about equine therapy. What is that? I mean, what do you do?
Well, I started working and getting my certifications in equine therapy about 8 or 9 years ago, because I noticed when I was working and I worked a lot with kids and families, mostly kids in Department of Child Safety, and I noticed that when they would come to my office, they just weren't really engaged. They didn't, I had all these toys for them to play with and all kinds of different modalities, therapeutic modalities to introduce to them, but they just were like, no, this talking just wasn't their thing. So I started exploring animal-assisted therapy, and I ran across equine therapy. And there's a group called EGALA, which is Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association, and they're international. And so I went to their first training, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. I just saw how it could really be something, a therapeutic modality that would help to engage someone in a way that I'd never seen before. So I started working with kids in round pens with horses, and it opened up their whole world of being able to explain and talk about their issues in ways that, Winston Churchill said there's something about the outside of a horse that's good for the inside of a man or a person, and I really did see how that the horses, just being around them, helped the kids to really find their voice and talk about things that they never would have talked about across a desk.
So like probably when you first started, just like you see on the TV, you have the couch and you lay down and you're doing this and the therapist is talking,
notes,
right,
and the kids are falling asleep.
So I really can see how it would probably be very difficult to open up and to describe what's going on, and if you don't have some way to express what's going inside your head, then how can you fix it, right?
Right.
So, and I'm noticing a lot more people having, some kind of animal to help their therapy dogs.
Sure.
And I think it does. It really opens up. Growing up, I don't have pets per se. I got kids, but we lived on kind of a small farm, and I know what you're saying. It's a lot easier to go out there and even if you're by yourself and not with doing therapy, but you kind of talk to the animals and stuff, So is that kind of what happens when you're working with somebody and you're out there with the horse and are you grooming them and?
Well, EGALA focuses on groundwork, so most of that is not really taking care of the horse, but building a relationship with the horse. And we do that, we build relationships by being close to the horse, and grooming them is one of the things that they do in EGALA. I worked on a ranch in Tucson with, I actually was a supervisor, and I had 10 therapists that I supervised, and we had a caseload of anywhere from 400 to 600 kids and families who were involved in foster care and Department of Child Safety. And you can imagine some of those kids had some pretty severe issues, and so getting them around a horse and first of all having the horse accept them, having the horse leading this big animal around the ranch or around the round pen, getting the horse to move in directions, feeling that little bit of power that they had when they were at the ranch to have this animal that was listening to maybe they never were listened to at home, and so now all of a sudden they've got this big animal that's coming to them, and we did do some riding out there, but EGALA is mostly ground, so I focused really on just helping the kids build relationships with the horses, and I mean there were these horses that the kids would show up and the horses would start whinnying and they'd be saying, "That's my kid," and so the kids they get the sense that this horse likes me, wants to be around me. And horses do mirror our inner, whatever's going on inside of us. The horse tends to know. I had kids that were very behavioral, and to put it lightly, and they would stand in a round pen and the horse would look at them like, "You're not getting near me," because horses are prey animals. So I used to always tell the kids, see, they don't know if you're going to feed them or eat them. So you have to build a relationship with them. They have to trust you, and then you learn to trust them. And so it's an exercise in trust too when you're with horses. These are big animals.
So in some cases, the horse is actually kind of guiding the relationship, and it can sense whether the child is high-strung or whatever the case, or very shy. So that's interesting that it kind of works both ways. That the child can help start creating that relationship, or the horse senses it and reacts to what they're feeling, and sometimes it happens right away to create that bond.
Yeah.
But sometimes
it takes a while. I mean, I had one little girl that chose the same horse every single time, and for I don't know how many weeks the horse would stand over in the corner and she'd say, "Well, like everybody else, the horse just doesn't like me." And so through a series of therapeutic, just being able to do some therapy with her and get her to relax, some breathing exercises and things like that, she would go into the round pen and she'd sit on a mounting block, which was these little steps. She'd sit on the mounting block waiting for the horse to come over to her, and one day, just out of the blue, the horse walked over and she was sitting looking at me, and the horse walked over and he put his head over her shoulder. And from that point on, they were best friends.
Huh. Interesting.
And you know what? Years later, because she was this young girl was about 8 or 9 years old. Years later, her mother called me and said it made all the difference in her life, and because she'd been through foster care, 10 foster care families before her adoptive family, and the adoptive mother said, I don't know what we would have done without the equine therapy.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And to be able to see that change and because of it helped with other issues that maybe you never even addressed.
Yeah.
That just subconsciously that bond, and like you say, acceptance. And and I know that's when I'm going into the schools and talking with the kids about they're depressed or being picked on, bullied, or different things like that. I find that everybody needs to be a part of something. Mm-hmm. And so especially in that foster care system, they probably lose that sense of belonging, because now it's like, nobody likes me, I'm the outcast, or whatever the case. So that type of, and I think right now, like these times now that we're having these really weird pandemic issues going on, and health issues, and people are staying more indoors, they're not getting out. I think we're seeing a lot more issues, mental health issues, of people not knowing what to do. Right. And so what are some of the options that people, maybe they forgot that there's things that they could do that might help them out mentally? Because if they're stuck indoors all the time and they're not getting out, they might start getting that feeling of nobody likes me, nobody cares about me, who's checking in on me, things like that. So what are some options that maybe people can probably consider?
Well, I think when we talk about mental health, there's actually two aspects that I think of, and there's probably two types of people who are kind of pandemic isolated right now, and there's the mental health. There's, like we were saying earlier, the good mental health, and with good mental health, it's usually people that okay, this is a situation that I don't want to be in. Events are taking a turn that I wouldn't necessarily have thought would happen, but I have some social outlets. I can call my friends on the phone, I can Zoom with people, I can read a good book, I can take a walk, I can visit my animals. So that generally leads to people who are pretty positive and they have good mental health. Then there's poor mental health, and it's pretty much the opposite of what I just said. I mean, people that they're socially isolated, they don't really have anyone that they can call on the phone, they maybe are living alone, and they're not, I don't want to read a book, I don't want to listen to music, I don't want to take a hike today. That really leads to depression. I mean, and it can be chronic or acute, but it really leads to the person to a place where they become so isolated that now maybe they stop getting out of bed. They're sleeping all day long. Even if people try to get in touch with them, they don't want to see anybody, they don't want to talk to anybody, because they've become very sad and very depressed.
Right, and I think technology these days, there's great ways to be able to reach out. Now, granted, I just recently taught a class, and half the people showed up in person, the other half we were doing on Zoom, and I kind of didn't care for that process. But yet, on the other hand, it's still a great way to be able to reach out and have some connection with the outside world. Mm-hmm. But some of these people, like we're talking about, maybe they don't have access to that technology. They don't have computers. They don't have internet.
But almost everybody has a cell phone nowadays.
Right.
So just even if somebody, if you have a neighbor that can reach out to somebody who might be isolating in their home, and I know we call it quarantining, we call it isolating, whatever the term you use is, it still doesn't hurt to have somebody call. Churches are great for reaching out. I know my church in Tucson, and there's churches all around the valley that are doing things to reach out.
Right, and I think people kind of, it's interesting. I think the world has gotten very technologically advanced, but yet we've kind of lost that reach out and be a good neighbor. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to get back to that, like you say, checking on your neighbors and being, and granted, yeah, you don't have to go and physically talk to them, but, use your phone, call them up. I think, my kids use that FaceTime or I don't know, I think that's what it is, but you can see them on the other end of your phone, and that's really pretty cool. So it's nice to be able to stay in touch with my kids and grandkids that way. And so I think general public needs to remember that there's things like that they can do too.
Well, and I think so with good mental health, people reach out and they find those alternatives and those avenues that keep them connected to their community. Somebody that maybe has poor or unhealthy mental health, they're not going to reach out. So they need somebody that can reach out to them. Right. Meals on Wheels is a great thing. I have a brother-in-law who does Meals on Wheels in Texas, and he loves it because it gives him the opportunity to go in and check on people and say hi to them. But I mean, just looking for resources, and if you know somebody that has shut themselves off, then maybe even helping them to find a way to get connected. My granddaughter does Zoom with her Sunday school class, and what they do is they do a scavenger hunt.
Oh,
and
nice.
It's so cute to watch them, watch her running around the house looking for this stuff and then coming back to her little iPad, and so there's tons of things that you can do with your kids to keep them occupied too.
Right, and there's lots of programs, and I find with myself, I feel much better and happier when I'm reaching out and helping somebody else. So I think that's also a good way, and I think we've kind of gotten away from that too, is we got to help each other. We're in this together. In fact, being a brand new year, I know January is typically a month that people set those new goals, and I'm going to do this year, and I'm going to, improve, or whatever the case. How does setting goals and things like that improve a person's mental health, and is that something that you kind of work with in a patient setting type of deal?
Sure. Well, I think setting goals are real important whenever you want to set them. It doesn't have to be January 1st, but I think first of all, goals have to be attainable, because everybody says that if you set a goal, I'm going to lose 50 pounds, and then you gain 50 pounds, then obviously that's going to
or even if you just gain 10,
yeah,
it's depressing.
It's going to cause a little consternation, and so looking at goals that are really achievable, and setting those goals and also setting goals that matter. Maybe it is, I'm going to reach out to my neighbor this year. I'm going to repair that relationship that I had with a family member, or I am going to go to the gym, because my thoughts are body, mind, and spirit. And so I think it's really important to focus on your body and taking good care of your physical health. So that's eating right, exercising, and having those social connections. But then also your mind. You got to have a healthy mind. You need to. I always call it. I do mindfulness work when I'm working with my clients, and so with mindfulness, we think about three sections of the brain. One is your analytical side, one is your emotional side, and then the other one is kind of in the middle where you have the balance, and we call that our wise mind. And so I always tell people, you don't want to be too analytical, you don't want to be too emotional. You want to get kind of centered where you can look at it from both perspectives, but then also have the wisdom that you need. And then, of course, spirituality. Prayer and meditation is something that's very important. I'm also a chaplain, so that's very important.
Yeah, and and I know some people out there, they don't believe in a deity or anything like that, but there's other ways and other things, like you say, meditation, yoga. I keep thinking I might try that one of these years. But especially as I get older, my body doesn't stretch and bounce back like it used to, and so but yeah, it's taking time to set realistic goals and is important.
Well, if you set that yoga goal, you could always just start like slow, and the stretches don't have to be with your leg over your head or anything like that. Yoga really is relaxing, and I know it sometimes gets it gets a bad rap, but I like yoga.
And anything, like I know my dad, he's got Alzheimer's, but he still loves to do word search. And I think that's a lot of what keeps him a little more active. He doesn't get out or anything like that, but just mind exercises and simple things to help kind of, like you say, keep you centered, keep you focused. And and I know a lot of people out there, maybe they kind of forget where they can reach out to. They don't feel comfortable talking to their neighbor, but some of the information that you brought to us, there's tons of lots of phone lines that you can call, the suicide hotline, and other things, and locally reaching out to your church group or even just a friend. How many of us do even actually really know who our neighbors are and know our neighbors' names?
Yes. Yeah, we've sort of become a closed-in society where we're just focused on work and getting home and making dinner and, feeding the kids, helping with homework or whatever, or even, a lot of people commute and so just getting home can be a challenge. But I really do think it's important to be able to reach out and yeah, I mean, I gave you a few. We talked about it earlier, Kirk, about with the pandemic how scary it has been for a lot of people. We've seen an increase in domestic violence. We've seen an increase in suicide ideations, and so calling the suicide hotline. There are a ton of different things on Google. Just Googling it.
Right.
If you're a family member or a friend and you know somebody that's going through a hard time and might have suicidal thoughts, I worked in a hospital emergency department for years and saw a lot of cases of suicide ideation, and thank God a few of them were completed, but not all of them, and so if you have somebody that's really on the brink and their suicide ideation has turned into more than just the thought, call 911. I mean, that's the best thing to do to help your friend or your family member. But if they would be willing, if somebody has suicidal thoughts and they would be willing to call someone, then the suicide hotline is a good place to start, and there's somebody there that can talk to them.
And I know a lot of the younger generation, they prefer texting. And I know there's a number 741-741 that you can text to, and that's a crisis hotline. So lots, like you said, lots of information out there. And another thing we were talking about earlier too is just simply reading or listening to books. There's different Kindle and Audible. So some of them they actually read to you. And so as you're driving, you can be listening, and it kind of helps you to kind of focus, bring you back to that center and try to get that balance back and give you information. And I think that's something too that we've kind of gotten away from is actually physically reading good books or listening to them now, because life's busy.
Right, and there's some really good self-help books out there. Dr. Aman, I gave you some of his information in here, but there's one that's called Feel Better Fast and Make It Last, and Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And so a lot of that's kind of based on cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, which helps us to have a different mindset about, so we've got a very negative thought right now about something, and cognitive behavior therapy comes in and says, how can you change that thought to make it more positive? And maybe it's just a couple little things, and maybe it's just a few small steps. but you just keep working towards the positive in your situation until, cognitive behavior therapy sometimes says, cut that thought off and move straight to this thought. But it really does help you to change from the negative to the positive. And if we can change our brain and we can change the thoughts that are going on in our brains, then I probably shouldn't say this, but maybe we wouldn't all need so many pharmaceuticals all the time. Maybe Dr. Aman really talks about getting away from pharmaceuticals and trying to change your thoughts, and that's my philosophy too. First, I think we have to look at helping people to solve. I don't solve problems. I just help people figure out ways to solve their own problems.
Right. Give them options. Give them tools in their toolbox.
Right.
And when you talk about the pharmaceuticals, and I know there's so many out there, and if you're going to different doctors, they may be prescribing medications on top of other medications that interact with each other and cause other issues, and or maybe it's too much or not enough. I think they do have their place, and in most cases, I think maybe it's more for a temporary, like you're saying, to help you get past that difficult point to where you can start doing that change of mind.
Right.
And because I know when we're talking about even doing educational classes and we're trying to change a behavior, you have to give them the options and what, you don't see that change of behavior until they have a change of mindset.
That's right. It really does take the changing the mind first. And I always say to my clients, I have a PhD, I'm not a medical doctor or a psychiatrist, I don't prescribe medication, but I always ask them, when you go see your psychiatrist or you see your medical doctor, ask them for the lowest dose and start low, because a lot of times doctors, and if somebody's in crisis, maybe they feel like this is what's necessary right now. Again, I'm not a medical doctor, but if it's somebody that's just trying to get stable in whatever's going on in their life, then I say start with the lowest dose of a medication. Some of the side effects to me are as toxic and detrimental to the person in some ways than their illness is.
Yeah.
So I always just say start at a low dose, continue to have therapy, and eat healthy. Think about the mind, body, and spirit, and that usually helps a lot.
Well, that's a great way to kind of finish up our conversation. We're kind of out of time, but thank you for joining us on this edition of Safe and Sound, Teresa. It's been a pleasure being able to have you talk with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of Safe and Sound. Join us next month for another edition.